to, the objective is that there's been a problem and we're going to iterate towards solving the problem. Okay, so what's the problem? The problem is high water table right now, or high water at Lake Clementi. And it's an issue that I've been tasked to look at and make recommendations in order to resolve the matter. Now, I think some of you have been provided with a little summary sheet here. Gives you some context of what we were tasked to do initially and the work that we commenced doing, and then what our preliminary findings were. And what's happened at this point is that we have given a presentation to council, and council felt that we should bring all the stakeholders to bear and do a presentation to them and have some questions and answers and reach a consensus on what might be done. So that's the objective here today. So I want to begin by maybe going back to, if you follow your screens there a little bit, give you a little bit of context on Lake Clementi. And Kyle, if you want to zoom in on that a little bit, on Lake Clementi itself. A little bit more. Okay, so we're doing double electronic. So our screen is sharing with that screen. So it might be a little bit jumpy. Can you a little bit more?
It's showing Lake Clementi. There's the guy talking down there.
We have meeting, everyone watching.
Bill Dorn, he's in there. And well, that's Bob. And there's, I don't know who the other guy is beside.
Okay, so if we could just get everybody who's watching online to not talk for a minute while the presentation's going on.
Okay. Okay, so maybe I can grab some notes for you. A little bit here. I'm just going to go a little bit closer here.
Oh, Lord, that's the lawyer.
No.
So I'm going to zoom in here. Can everybody see this? This is Lake Clementi, and Lake Clementi has a sort of a smaller catch basin here. There's hills towards the north, up against Brandon a little bit, that drains into Lake Clementi, and it also flows. The water flows down here. And there's a drain going out to the west to the highway, crossing the number 10, if you follow my mouse. And then it goes along the field here. And this is very shallow and wide, the water here. Then it goes along through here, meandering. It gets a little bit tighter here. And it goes through here and up and into this area here, which is quite well defined. Overall, what it actually does, it runs north this way and around that Brandon Hills a little bit and goes into the Assiniboine. That's what happens here. Now, Lake Clementi is very reflective of the water table. It's highly sensitive to the water table. So whatever happens in Lake Clementi, it's really driven by the water table a lot. So we've been watching what's happening. I've gone back historically a little bit.
New one.
Can I go back to history here? I can remember this. Okay, we can go here. Yeah. So I want to contextualize everybody a little bit with a little bit of history. So we're going to start with an image of 1958. Right? This is what it looked like, Lake Clementi in 1958.
Hello.
Bring it up
Yes.
Okay. So as you can see, in 1958, it was a lot lower.
Okay. Yeah.
There was quite a bit of land up here. And this is a property that's being inundated right now.
Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye.
So I don't remember 1958. I wasn't around. But one thing we want to notice here, there's no construction here whatsoever in 1958. Okay. So in 1964. Okay, so the water level has fluctuated again. Okay, so it's a little bit higher, the lake, in 1964, but we have seen a little bit of construction right here is happening. So the house was built between 58 and 64. Anyways, the phase one of the house, not the addition. And there is a drain over here. That's not worked in the field, but it's not used, right? Because if we go back to 1985, this is 1985. So the construction is still there, the house is still there. The lake is generally at the same level. So we're in 1985. 1993. This is a relative historical low. The lake is really, really low in 1993. There's a little bit of a discussion about it might have been lower in Henry. When was that? You say,
Early 80s.
Early 80s maybe. Right, but this is really, really low here. And again, it's reflective of the water table at the time. We go back to 2006, that's 2006. So that's a lot more recent, and you can see the building, the house over here, and the island is still there. And George and Sandy McMaster still had the place back then. I knew them, I was out there from time to time. And so they built a gazebo out here. This is the way they live, right? Then we go to 2011. And this is shot in the winter time. And this is the buildings. The addition is on the house now. This is the garage. And the water table has come up. The water level in the lake has come up, right? But still, it's all good. 2018. It really jumped. The island's completely gone up there, right? So this is what's left of it. So the water table, the water level in the lake really jumped high, right? And then we're going to look at 2019, what's happened in 2019. It's gone even higher in 2019. So that. Okay, so obviously there's concerns about, you know, hey, what's going on with the water, and people are being inundated, particularly Janet. Okay, so from historical research, it appears that there has been an upward trend of water in that Lake Clementi. It's very much tied to the water table. And I don't think in the last 75 years it has ever decanted on the west side of the lake across Henry's land there. It's never done that in the last 75 years, right? So it's kind of interesting. So the issue is now there's a trend of upward pressure for the elevation of water. So is that trend going to change? Is it going to go higher? Is it going to go lower? Are we going to go back into a drought cycle? Well, nobody knows that. I'm an engineer, not a magician, right? So I can't tell you what's going to happen. But what we do need to do, and this is what the municipality has tasked me with, is to say, hey, listen, let's set a high water mark in the lake. Okay, so when we're talking about setting a high water mark in the lake, we're not talking about draining the lake. We're not also talking about controlling the water levels in the lake. Because controlling the water levels in the lake means if the water level goes below a certain level, we're going to bring water in. That's not on the plate. Nobody's going to be doing it. So the idea is just setting the high water mark, so it can't go higher than that. Now, there's several competing needs with that. There are some people that want the lake to be, even the water level in the lake to be a little bit higher than it is now. Some people say it's good right now, and some people want it lower. So we have to reconcile all those competing needs with the stakeholders. So the primary stakeholders are those people living around the lake, meaning Jen and Ed and Henry, the Carols there, then the rest of the people around the lake, and then the downstream people, what's happening there. And then there's a matter of costs. Okay, I'm not here to talk about costs today. Necessarily, I can give estimates if the questions come up, but I'm here to talk about a technical solution to the problem. Now, the technical solution to the problem is it's not something that you can calculate as to this is the level that the lake should be. The level of the lake is a judgment call, reconciling all the competing needs based on the information that's been gathered. So one of the things we've done out there, as indicated in our report here, a short report, is that we've gone and surveyed the daylights out of everything out there, right? And we kind of, got that background information. We've looked at documents, we've looked at the historical record and what's going to happen. So in terms of trying to determine what that reconciliation point is between all the stakeholders, what we did is we kind of started with Jen and Ezra as residents over there. Okay, so we went back and we said to ourselves, well, how are we going to adjudicate that? What would be the basis of our assertion about what the levels would be on that? So we went back and got a little bit of advice from planning documents, municipal planning documents that are generally ubiquitous in Manitoba everywhere. And the planning documents always start out, if you're going to build on a floodplain, you need to have the main floor of your house a minimum of 1 meter above the high water line. So if we throw that back, and what we say is, okay, so we have established the elevation of the home, the main floor in that home. So we need to be a minimum of 1 meter lower. So we looked at what are the implications of that? Is that sufficient, right? And we determined that that wasn't sufficient because there is a crawl space under that house. And you can't have, because the house or the land is hydraulically connected from the lake to the home, you can't have water, standing water at the home. So what happened is we decided that we need to go 1 more meter down. And that was a practical solution. Now, if you go back, let's pull up that set of drawings, please. Yeah, let's look at that one. Okay, so zoom in on that one. Okay, so maybe I'll scroll 1 more. There's one. That one. Zoom in on that one a little bit. Okay, what you're looking at there is cadastral lines, which are basically properties. Now, the property that we're looking at here, in particular, what we're talking about right now is Jen and Ed's property, which was this. And this is a Manitoba government survey, right? Okay, so that's their actual property. So what happened is they got a total about 5.5 acres there. And right now, the non-flooded portion of their property is 2.83 acres. Okay, so they've been substantially inundated with, in terms of loss of land. So we talked at the RM level, I talked to Jen about it, I'm sure she talked to Ed about it, and we agreed that it's not the responsibility of the RM to bring that back, right? So they're not asking that. Their ask is extremely reasonable. So we're not trying to give that back to them. What we're trying to do is we're trying to say, hey, what is the high watermark in that lake? What should it be so that they can reasonably enjoy that place, reconciled with the downstream effects through Henry's Land and the other stakeholders around the lake, right? That's the objective. And that's a difficult one to carry out, but that's what we're trying to do. And we have recommendations accordingly, right? So if there is going to be a dry cycle, that's up to God, and then they get their land back. It wasn't up to the municipality, and that was understood when we had that discussion at the table, right? So what we're doing here is we're trying to engage reason and logic to put this matter to bed, right? Okay, so let's talk about how a little bit more explicitly how we came to that number. Okay, so can you go to that slide where we show the cross section of the house, please? It's the very last page. Okay, what we're showing here is a cross section of the house. So this is a cross section of Jen Annette's house. So the main floor level is this top line here. And I don't know that you can read that. Maybe we'll zoom in on this a little bit so we get an elevations. Okay, I think we can see that now. Okay, so the main floor elevation is 432.22, and we can round it to 432.2. Okay, the natural lake outfall, that means on the west side, going over to Henry's Land, there's a bit of a hump, and then it falls down and it follows. The top of that hump, the natural outfall of that lake is 431.7. So, but that's half a meter lower than the top of their floor. Okay, the approximate historical high, that would be sort of in the last, let's say, 6 months or so. We have an elevation of 431.17. And then Lake Clementi elevation right now, as of December 14th, we surveyed it yesterday, right? It's about 430.59, 430.6, right? Okay, so in terms of that elevation, that is very close to the same elevation as to when the culvert was taken out. It's just remained the same level. Okay, so in discussions with Henry and with Jen, you know, I asked Jen to get me some numbers and maybe some pictures, how often their sump is running and what's going on there. And it was kind of poignant because today she tells me that okay, the sumps are running about right now every 5 minutes. Okay, and then the power went out. And when the power went out, because the lake level is at 430.6, which is higher than her the top of her crawl space grade. The water started coming up in the crawl space and it reached actually 2 inches in 20 minutes. It was 2 inches.
Over 2 inches
You know,
above the sump
Yeah.
rim.
Yeah.
In a contained area.
yeah.
In the 20 minutes the
Right.
power was out. I was
Okay.
2 inches over.
Okay, so it is certainly my opinion that that's too high because nobody's going to feel comfortable going away on vacation if that's happening. Right? Nobody's going to feel good about that. So if the pumps don't pump, we want the water table in that crawl space to be just below grade. That would be the absolute minimum. It would be great if it was further down, but we have to reconcile downstream effects. Right. So where that translates to is this red line is what we're proposing, and that was on the summary sheet, is 430.2. And if you look at that line going across on the screen there, you're seeing that it's just below the crawl space elevation. Right? Okay, so what's the difference between where the water is now and the red line? Because the water is shown right now at 430.59. So that would be about 15 inches lower than what it is right now. That's what it would be. Okay, so that is our recommendation as to what that number, the lake level should be. Now, historically, is that a reasonable number in terms of going back to history and saying, does that make sense in terms of what the lake levels were? Well, if we go back to 2006, you know, the island was all there, so the lake was lower than that. And I don't think there were any complaints then too much. Yes, it's going to fluctuate. So all what we're proposing to do, which is my recommendation, is set the high water on. Okay. So we haven't talked about how we're going to do that yet. We're just talking about that number. Okay. So there's another reason for setting it at 430.2 meters. And the reason is this: if you get a heavy rain, the lake's gonna, or a spring mount, the lake's gonna jump a little bit. Okay, depending on what we're having in terms of a weather event. Okay, so it's gonna come up 2, maybe 4 inches, and then it goes down again. And as soon as it does, there's pressure on that house. Right? And we don't want that. Right? We want to be very careful that we mitigate that pressure as much as possible. Right? In terms of going lower, like 430, 429.8 or something like that, what it does, it impacts Henry's land. Right? Now we can talk about the mechanisms to minimize that impact. Also, what happens is if you set it at below 430, or the lower you set it rather, what happens is there's more water coming out of that lake. Right? And then there's downstream effects, right? Because people have water in that drain longer, right? So 430.2 is, in our opinion, the highest you could make that reasonably. Highest you could reasonably make that. Right, and reconcile with Janet's house with the impact on Henry's land and the downstream stakeholders. Right, now there's costs in here too, which we can talk about a little bit, but that's our recommendation to you with respect to that. Right. So the next part of the presentation here was going to be talk about mechanisms of getting the water out of Lake Clementi, but maybe before we do that, if there's any particular questions on this matter, maybe we could talk about that. Would that be all right, James?
Yeah, sure. So the way I was gonna structure questions is, Barb, did you have those yellow pieces of paper? In case we don't answer your questions tonight, Phil and I and Joni will endeavor to answer your questions after the fact. Barb's handing out some yellow pieces of paper. They need your email and name and phone number on there for us to answer your questions, just for the sake of time. But for right now, on this particular topic, yes?
Could they email as well? That was asked. And
Email,
on
yeah.
top of the letterhead? Does that
Yes,
help
yes,
too? Okay.
for sure. But they need my email, right? So,
Or could they
or,
send it to me
yeah.
at info?
Yeah, as long as, like, you can email your questions afterwards, you can hand in your questions on the yellow piece of paper if you want at the end of the night so that we can get back to you. And also right now, we're just gonna limit the questions for Phil on this particular topic to 2 minutes. So we don't go on a tangent, right? So if there's any questions on this first part of Phil's presentation, please stand up and ask one at a time, please. Yes, sir.
Well, Phil knows me, I know Phil, so
Hi.
introductions, Phil. You said you looked at the hydrogeology of the area,
Yes.
and you've found a direct correlation between the lake level and the hydrogeology, or is it more
We
runoff and
engaged,
rainfall?
a senior hydrologist on it, and he has indicated that it's highly reflective of the water table. The basin isn't that big.
Yeah, it's pretty small.
Yeah, it's pretty small.
Yeah.
So it's largely connected and reflective of the groundwater in that area. That's what his opinion on it.
And then if you say, and I come in late in it, so
Sure.
it is a dumb question. We're really talking about one property here.
One property that's getting inundated with
So we're talking
water.
about one property, or all the properties in that area that's adversely affected, am I correct?
I think the one property is affected by the high water table of Lake Clementi, but there is downstream effects as
Well,
well.
I appreciate that, but
Yeah.
when we're talking about Lake Columbia, there's one property in particular, from what I can see here, that is inundated.
Yes.
Is there any,
inundated with
is there
water.
any, yeah, is there any consideration of protecting that property or raising it, or? As opposed to?
That's a possible mechanism by which to address the problem. Yes, that's a possibility versus, let's say, conveying the water out of Lake Clementi.
It seems like there's a whole rationale for determining a lake level I mean, let's forget about all the ecological impacts and the natural ebb and flow of water and what happens if you drop the lake level down. We have a dry year next year, nobody's gonna be trucking water in here to restore it, so that happens. So there's a natural process. We've seen dry years, we've seen wet years. I'm pretty sure that will continue long before you and I, long after you and I are dead.
Yeah.
So the whole rationale here for determining a lake level control or regulation here is purely based on protecting one individual's property. I'm not trying to be insensitive, I'm just trying to get the facts.
Yes, that's the context.
Okay.
Right?
That's what's
Now,
driving
the-
this process.
Now, I'm sorry?
That's what's driving this entire process.
Um,
We wouldn't be talking here if somebody's property is not being flooded, is that correct?
Okay, so if we could let Phil answer that part of the question, your time's up. Thank you.
yeah, certainly it is the primary driver, is that one property, absolutely. I think there are minor concerns that have been conveyed to me, but they're secondary. The houses are much higher and further back.
Yeah.
But shoreline issues, riparian areas, that kind of thing, those kind of concerns, wildlife, it's been conveyed to me.
Okay.
But the primary driver certainly is that.
No, that's fine, that's what I thought, I just wanted to make sure I understand it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. Other questions on that part of Phil's presentation? In the back, sir. Sure.
Is that part of,
Hey, Ed.
well,
Hi.
now, it seems with your maps there, is if the property was built at a time of extreme low water.
I wouldn't characterize it that way. Like, if I go back to 1958 and
I think you
1960,
should go back further yet if you could.
I can't, right? I don't have any information. Right. I
My
don't
dad
disagree.
says that route ran out when he was a kid all summer long. Out that way. across Henry's.
Right, and I have no knowledge of that,
And,
right?
yeah, I know.
Okay, that was, must have been pre-58.
Way.
Right, and I agree with you. Historically, that lake could have been double the size. I have no idea. But I'm saying in the last 60, 70 years, this is the knowledge base that we have. And now that there are houses around that lake, if I were to build that house in 1964, let's say 1960 and 64, would I have anticipated what happened today? Would it have been reasonable to anticipate that? I don't know.
Well, I think like, water goes up, water goes down.
Right.
It happens.
Yep, it does. You're right.
I'm with this fellow here. It seems to me to be a lot of trouble to do all this work for one place, which I don't understand how. I realize that the laws were different then, but how could a place have been built if you so much, a permit to get a place to build, if you're supposed to have a meter.
Thank you for your question. That's time up for the question, but I'll give Phil a chance to answer that part of it.
Can you bring up the fair question, all right? And because, us human beings, we don't actually live that long in geological time. And so there's limited information that we have. So if you look at this here, you can say, well, what happened that this thing was built so low? But you go over here, same thing happens here. This is Glen Paddock. He's getting inundated too. Same with this house over here. They're concerned. And this is newly built. So I wasn't involved, so I can't speak to the particulars of what's happening, but they're very concerned, rightfully, justifiably so, that that's the case. But this is the problem that we now have to live with, right? So it's a fair question to ask, how did this happen? But it's also a moot point, right? So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to solve the problem, reconciling all those points. And yeah, it's fair to ask, but it's immaterial, actually.
Thank you. This gentleman here, if you could state your name and.
Gord Smith.
Good word.
When you say about there's two properties on the west side of number 10, the only reason they're getting inundated is because you guys are forcing the water over. They wouldn't have a problem if you weren't forcing the water that way.
Okay, so.
Secondly, why are you cherry picking years on your water table marks? I know when Ed and Jen bought the property, why didn't you have the picture of the property as it was when they purchased it?
Okay, that's two questions. Let's give Phil a chance to answer those first, okay?
Okay. So nobody's dumping water over there per se.
Well, you are because you
Okay,
put a
so-
channel in and dump the water over there.
That was an emergency matter. All right, so nobody's on a ongoing basis dumping water. Okay, so if your house was flooded, would you want them, the municipality, to do what they did on an emergency basis to save your house? The answer is yes. You don't need to answer that.
Actually, I would have never bought that house. And
No,
most
no,
people would have never.
that's
bought
an
that house.
immaterial answer. Right. Okay, so the issue is, was that the right thing to do? Absolutely, within boundaries, within reason, and that's exactly what the municipality tried to do. Your second question, I'm not sure what your,
Why you're cherry picking the years.
Okay.
When they bought the house in 2015, I believe it was, you should have had the lake levels at that time as well. But you jumped from 2006 up to 2019. Where's the 2015?
right.
Okay, let's let him to answer, okay?
So,
Thanks.
okay, if you go onto Google, Google Earth, it doesn't have 2015.
2014?
I don't believe it does.
Well,
We can
then
look it up right now.
it goes
There's
from-
no cherry picking here done. These pictures were from an archive that, from a hydrologist, that were conveyed to me as research he did regarding that lake. There was no cherry picking going on. I would love to find an image
Well,
of
I
that.
know a lot of
215.
people here have got pictures of the lake at the level when they purchased it.
Sure,
So,
that may be, but I don't have it.
yeah, well, you can get them. I'm quite certain you
Sure.
can get pictures of it.
Okay, thank you. You're out of time right now. Let's let Phil finish. Is there anything else on that? Oh, yeah, if you could stand up, state your name.
Patricia Warburton. I have two questions. The first one is the elevation of the culvert at the highway. Do you have the measurement on that?
The culvert at the highway? Yes, we do. Cross section. You see this over here where my mouse is? That's the culvert, 426.27.
My second question is, I'm not a mathematician, so I just need to logically put in my brain that we're asking them for 15 inches lower than what we're sitting at now for the water. Is that how this all works out? in
Yes.
Inches, because we've been measuring in inches.
Yes, it's about 15 inches lower than where it is right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions on that part of it? Yes.
Donna McIntosh.
Okay, hi, Donna.
Hi. I just want to, it's not really necessarily a question, but I mean, from what I've read, the prairies are historically prone to drought. Now, if there were a drought after, I don't know what the grand total of the lake level is going to be lowered. I know you said an extra 15 inches, I'm not exactly sure what it's already lowered. So if there is a drought after that, and that lake dries out, because it is quite shallow, and it's, I'm not saying it's gonna dry right out, but it's gonna be slimy or whatnot. Why is that considered an act of God? Determines that. I'm sorry, but when it's drained by man, then if it dries out really quick, that is not an act of God. That's not natural.
Okay, first of all, when you and I discussed it over the phone, we talked about that. Nobody's draining the lake. We're talking about setting a high water mark.
There was,
That's what we're talking about.
but there was drought from the
Okay,
1999 to the mid 2000s.
Right. So whose act is it if there's a drought? Or if it's really, really wet? Who's this? Who did it?
Oh, God.
Right. So who's responsible?
If you drain it, that is not natural. I don't consider
Okay,
that.
we're not draining the lake. We've talked.
You're
about
lowering it, okay? My choice
We're
of words. is
setting
that.
a level.
You're lowering it. That's a lot of
setting
water.
You've asked your question. Your time is up. You, sir. Stand up, give your question, please. And name.
I'm wondering if you can show us on a map what the 15-inch, what the contour line of the water would be by dropping the shore of the lake. Would you drop it by 15 inches?
That's a fair question. I actually don't have that information with me. Okay, but that would be, that's a fair ask.
Can you get us that?
I think I could.
So you can get that question to me either via email or on your yellow piece of paper. And that's gonna end our time for the questions on that part so that we can allow Phil to go on to the second part of his presentation. Thanks, everybody. So Phil, part two.
Okay, so part two is a little bit discussion of what the possibilities could be for, you know, setting that high water mark and the mechanisms of getting the water out. Well, okay, so can you pull up for me this profile here, C302, please? I think it's this one. Oh, I'm sorry, I think I want this one. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so let's show this one. Let's show this one. Let's show them. Okay, so I just want to draw your attention to this over here. Okay, so this is the west end of Lake Clementi, and this is the water level that it is right today. So it would have to go over this hump and then go down and follow the natural swale through Henry's Land, right? So we'd have to put a culvert in here, right? And all the way to here, it would be about 200 meters long in order to get that water to go into that drain because of that profile of the ground. Okay, and so that the inlet of the culvert, what we're proposing is 430.2. So how would that work? So the way it would happen is if there were to be a rain event or a storm event, the water level in Lake Clementi would rise 2, maybe 4 inches, depending on the sensitivity and the magnitude of the storm. So then it'd only be like 4 inches of water in the culvert, right? So it would decant slowly. So the idea is to really mitigate the amount of water that's going downstream and could possibly impact other people downstream because it really flattens out in that area, Oakland-Wawanesa and those neighbors there where Glen Paddock is and so on, right? So you want to be very careful of those impacts downstream. So it's very gentle decanting. And then over the course of a week or so, it decants. So there is a sensitivity to Jen and Ed's house as well as the downstream stakeholders. Now, when we're talking about Henry's Land, we would have to put something in there that would impact his land and the value of his land. And we need to talk to him about what that mechanism would be and that kind of thing. We talked about if we go to drawing. So let's go to 303. Yeah, that one top. Yeah, that one. Okay, so this is a little bit of a plan of the outfall. This would be Lake Clementi. So there'd be a little bit of a culvert right here and a little bit of trenching here. This is what it kind of would look like. This would be the impact on that piece of land, right? If you did that way. There is another way to do it, and we talked about it, council talked about it last day, you know, and is what we're talking about here is putting in drain tile. All right. Now, we're talking about, this is Lake Clementi here. So the drain tile would come from here and it wouldn't follow the bottom of the swale, the invert of the swale. What it would do is go a little bit up the hill here so that the burial depth would be deeper. That would be the idea, and that it would have very little impact, virtually none, on Henry's Land. Now, the land here would still drain. Sorry. lands, the overland drainage would still go into this swale and be conveyed over here. That would still be the case. What we're talking about with this infrastructure is just decanting the lake if it's greater than 430.2. All right, so it's only if it's above that mark would it be necessary to decant, and this infrastructure would work. Okay, so that is sort of mechanism A. Can we go back to the Google image?
Was the proposed culvert length,
Sorry,
the culvert length? I
uh,
missed that.
sorry, are you talking about?
You said the culvert you propose, what's the length of culvert you proposed?
I didn't propose already.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
Can you go to
So
303?
if there's questions during the presentation, if you could write them down, and we'll get to your questions once Still's done.
Okay, no, I want this. That's 303. Okay, so the culvert here would be something like 30 or 40 feet, right? This would be the culvert, but then it would be showing a ditch. All right, just to be clear, we have no permission to do that yet.
No, I'm just.
Yeah, but that would be the
I get a
idea.
magnitude in my mind, so just
Yeah,
40
30 or
feet
40
culvert to
feet.
swale.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so, yeah, but this whole impact of this whole culvert and swale is about 200 meters. Right, if that's what you're asking. Okay. Now let's go to the Google Earth image, please. So what we discussed right there with that mechanism, why is it turning? So what we discussed here is going across Henry's land this way and down here and how that could be done. There's a couple of mechanisms there. And this is understanding that there'd still be water in this drain because it is a natural drain that's there. Okay, so then we're talking about this water suddenly flowing across the highway here, and now we're into Oakland-Wawanesa. Right? So we're going past here, and it's very shallow here and a wide spread, and it keeps going across here. And there's a concern with this this residence here. There's a concern with this residence here, and then it gets redefined here. And if we get over here, we're good. Okay, so one of the things that we explored is taking some of this water, and this is a discussion that we haven't had this yet with Oakland-Wawanesa, is it is feasible or tenable, costs money, but to go along this north ditch. Now there's a high spot here, but if we get through this high spot, you can convey this water completely this way and into this defined drain right here. It is doable, right? Okay, the question is, you know, whether there is funds to do that or apply for funds or make it happen. So I wanted to show you what that looks like. Let's find that drawing. Can we go to 101 first? Okay, 101 here is sort of the natural way the water flows, right? That's what it does naturally. So we surveyed that. If we go to 102 is what we could do to keep it in the north ditch, right? Okay, so that's what that would look like in the north ditch. Now, if we look at it over here, you'll see that we show 300 meters of ditch grading. Sorry, would be required, then 370 meters of culvert, and another 36 meters of ditch grading, and we could probably get it into this swale here. That's what that would look like. Just as in terms of exploring an option. So those are the two options we did explore. And can you go to 302, please? So if we go to 302, this would be the cross-section of that road. That's what it would look like. So this is the center line of the road, this is the property line, the north, and this would be the excavation in that ditch. That's what the cross-section would look like. So it would be, the deepest is about 12 feet deep. So those are the possibilities. The downside, you put this infrastructure in, and guess what happens? If you buy a new snowmobile, it never snows. Right? You put the infrastructure in, don't use it. But again, we don't know what we don't know. Any questions on that?
Okay, same format. If we don't get to your question, you can submit it on the yellow piece of paper or to me, and we'll coordinate getting an answer. If you could stand up and give your name. Yeah.
But my question to you, Phil, is why can't we go over the hill? There's bi-directional drilling now where we can go through land, put pipes and all kinds of things, wires and stuff like that. Why do we have to take this so-called natural type pathway when nothing comes this? Change things now in this line. So why can't we take it down to the creek? Is that any type of,
I'm not sure I understand your question. I really want
instead
to,
of going along the natural way, like along
right?
the north side down and spending all, doing that natural process, so to sort of speak, why can't we just drill it to the corner? And like, not drill it, but let it run to the corner of 10
Okay,
and go straight and pick that way and save.
okay, so you realize going along the north ditch is the shortest, straightest run to that creek, but there is a hill, right?
Well, it's
So-
bi-directional drilling.
Well, yeah, so if you're somewhere around 10 or 12 feet deep, like that is, it's much more cost effective based on the size of pipe to cut and cover versus directionally drilling. If it's a small line, a 2-inch line, sure. But we're not talking 2 inches. We're talking quite a bit bigger.
If you go down the cost effective way, like, say a little bit of things that should have been done by a municipality in doing things, but cost
Right.
effective, it's gonna be price wise anyway. So
Thank you
let's just-
for the time. Let's let Phil answer that one, and then we're gonna come over here.
So the paths that we have chosen are the most efficient, cost-effective paths to go. Yes, we did not explore, raising the house and that kind of thing. You understand, right? But the path to that stream, yes, that's the most, what we chose is the most cost-effective way to do that. Certainly, that was our intent.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, Phil. Frank
Hi.
Jones. With all this work you guys have put into all these drawings and your surveys, I'm just curious with option A of continuing the draining with the 300-meter pipe to the corner of 10. I'm just curious about what that approximate cost is, and then option B being on the north side and going along the north side, what that cost would be approximately.
Sure, fair question. We think that to go, so if we're going to do the pipe, that's going to be buried all the way to the corner, right? Okay, so we have put down a manhole at the lake so that water would come in, and then a pipe all the way buried to the lake, drain tile or something like that. We think that's somewhere around 125. Okay, now the option, we're putting in a 30 or 40-foot culvert and cutting a swale, that would be somewhere around 50.
So your first number was cutting across the north side of 10.
I'm sorry, let me clarify. Okay, let's go to 303. Okay, this one, 40 to 50.
Okay.
Okay, that's still on Mr. Carroll's land, right? Okay, so go to the next one. I think it's the next page. This one here. So what we'd be looking to do is put a manhole over here.
Yeah.
And then an inlet into the lake. We would need to do a little bit of dredging.
Yeah.
Then we would bore this or cut and cover, whatever's the most cost effective, and go right to the corner here. We think that may be, Henry and I talked about it, maybe 100, 125.
And just to add on to that question, if we do go, if that happens, what is going to mitigate the issue of it crossing south and affecting the Oakland-Wawanesa properties?
Right, there would be at that point no mitigation other than it's only gonna happen above 430.2, number one, and number two, it's going to slowly, it's gonna be very much mitigated in terms of how aggressive that water is coming across. Because the lake's gonna go up in increments 2, 4, 6 inches max, right? Because it's not that sensitive, right? It's big enough so that its sensitivity is mitigated. So that culvert flowing 2 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches full isn't a lot of water. It will take some time to decant, which is precisely what we want. All right, now I can't talk to you about the specifics of that yet, but we can get into that a little bit. Right. Okay, so then the next one would be, you asked that question, can you find out going north? North, okay, so that would be 102, I believe. 102. So this option here, we were thinking somewhere around, we were thinking of 250, 275, something like that. We talked about.
Okay, question here for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Janine, I'm on the south side of the lake there, so this doesn't really affect me, but I'm just listening to the comments and it seems everybody likes the level of the lake right now. What could it be considered if their house got put on piles up, abolish the crawl space, abolish the sump pumps, make sure that their septic is okay, not cross-contaminating into the lake, and maybe drain the lake like 6 inches from what it is, set the level higher. Everybody's happy. They don't have to babysit a crawl space. But that money that you would put into the drainage, put it towards your house and put in a proposal for that, and it makes everybody happy.
Okay, I'll let Phil address that if he can.
Certainly, that's a viable solution. Okay, that would be a decision for council to do where they want to spend the money. Okay, just giving you a technical opinion on that, absolutely it's viable. Yes, you need Jen and Ed's permission, just like if you're going across Henry's land, you would need his permission. One of the things that we'd want to account for if the lake level goes up another 2 feet or whatever, right? Is that a possibility? Well, gentleman in the back indicated, I think Mr. Fardeau, that that's happened. So we want to be careful of that. But I think it's a viable solution. It could actually happen, but we need people on board, Jen and Ed on board to do that.
Okay, one follow-up for you. Go
Okay,
ahead.
with all the survey that you've done, can you put together a price, because you're the engineer, what it would cost to do that properly for them, so the council has numbers and they can make an educated decision?
Technically, I can do that, but I need council to
Approve it.
to prove me doing that. I work at their pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Bob McDonald, Oakland-Wawanesa. I just have a couple of questions. One, would there be a gate on the outlet end of the lake coming out before where the pipe starts? Or would it be just natural drain when it got to that pipe?
My recommendation is there would be no gate. So that thing would react, right? And there would be nothing to stop it from reacting.
Just like putting a dam in then, basically.
Yeah, you would need that thing, if there's a big rain, immediately there's a reaction.
Well, the next question I have, thank you for that. If the ditch you're proposing on the north side of the municipal road, great idea, but if it's gonna be an open drain, you need a 4-to-1 slope or whatever for safety, so you need a whole bunch of room if it's for depth, and also if you're bearing a culvert, if it's froze in the spring, that's a long area to steam.
You're right. You know, it's not, I completely agree. Now, we've checked our slopes and how that works, and it works, and we put that cross section on the drawing for you. So we actually checked the technical viability of that. Okay, but a 309-foot culvert, it's a long time, is a long culvert, right?
Long to steam if it's
Yeah,
froze.
long to steam. And what you do is you put up manholes every once in a while so you can get access. Even that is not a great solution, because who wants to go down there and steam a manhole, right? Completely agree.
Yep, thank you. That just go.
Thanks, Bob.
To go back a couple points, just right now, let's say it was all agreed to the level, the 15 inches lower. Let's say all of a sudden the heavens opened up and everybody agreed. And you're talking about having a culvert that when we have a massive rain, the lake goes up maybe 2 inches. So we're talking about this drainage all the way down, but we're not like, if you tile, is it even going to make it to the highway culvert? Is there that much water in 2 inches? What, am I missing something?
There is a lot of water there, Jen. Yes,
So
there
it's
is.
gonna need to be drained all the way, because like right now we have a heavy rain and it disperses. So to have that come off the lake, does it need to be tiled all the way to the highway, or will it, if you tile in your marshy area, will it disperse before it ever hits
No,
the field?
no, it won't. It'll flow, Jen, it'll flow.
Not much.
But yes, it's
With
a lot of
with the
water.
rain in 2 inches.
Okay, time's up for that one, Jim.
Yeah. It'll actually flow.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else on this? Or, yes, sir. Yeah, you asked a question on the first part, so you're allowed this time. Come on up, or stand up. Oh, no, this guy, you're okay. Yeah, I know, I called him actually, the black shirt, yeah.
Not sure, Curtis again. One question I have is, instead of digging a ditch across the road, have you looked at moving the approaches that the water running across there would affect?
I'm sorry. I don't
Instead
understand you.
instead of digging a ditch on the north side of the road.
Yeah.
Have you looked at what it would cost to move that approach, or a different makeup of the approach that affects the landowners on the south side of that road? So instead of digging a ditch.
You're talking about realigning, I'm not trying to understand your question, sir. You're suggesting that.
I can write it down. to you.
No, let's, okay. So this is the invert of the drain naturally as it goes. So you're suggesting, what if we realign the invert of the drain?
No. We're talking about the people on the south side of that gravel road with its impact, correct?
Right, and that's what I'm showing here, right?
And so why don't you let the water flow across where it normally does, but their issue is their approach to be able to replace, and it blows the culvert up.
Oh, I see.
So
It-
why
it
don't you
does-
come off of that service
The
road?
issue is more than that. Glenn Paddock was conveying to us that his property, his house gets flooded.
Okay.
Okay, there's more than just the approach matter. Quite a bit more. And the other house too, they have a hockey rink in the center of the drain, and their barn is really close to it. So there's, and those things, they are what they are. Should they have maybe built like that? Not necessarily, but now we gotta watch with them.
Gentleman in the plaid shirt, kind of question?
Um,
Yes.
So part of this is a long culvert, if you were to go straight west.
Along the north ditch.
Yes. Some of it's culvert, some of it's trench. And so it's gotta be 12 feet, how wide is that? room?
Okay,
To
we'll
get
pull
down
up
12 feet?
we'll pull up the cross section again for you.
And before you, I'll just ask my second question and sit down. This summer, on 3919, directly west of Henry's, it flooded part of my hayden because the water did not cross into Oakland. It went west on the north side of the road. Now, if you're proposing to go all the way, how do you keep that off that border? That ditch gotta be deeper, a lot deeper all the way.
Yeah,
The whole
not a lot deeper.
Well,
We
maybe a
would
lot.
grade, we would regrade a
I didn't
portion.
cut some of that hay, 'cause it's
Yeah.
better.
No, we would keep that water in the ditch. Okay, if that's your question, the intent would be to keep that water.
Well, I
in the
know,
ditch.
but
Right, and this is the cross section on your screen here, what it would look like. Now, if
Well, how
you,
far
if you
is
look
that
here, this is
slope
the
from
center
the-
line of the road. This is the center line of the road.
okay.
This is the north property line. So it's well within the right of way that we're proposing to put it in. We
But is the
surveyed
line
that,
still going
we surveyed
angled
that,
up after the property line?
I'm sorry.
Well, it looks on the map that the line's still going up after the property line is not right.
Well, this is the natural slope of the land. Okay, so any land drainage would certainly flow over here. Right? And then at the surface, it would either percolate down or would flow one way or the other back into this thing and be conveyed away.
Well, that whole corner slopes, but as it gets down through the Oakland Valley Road, it's pretty flat there.
Okay, yeah, okay, so try to figure out where it is here.
Okay, we're gonna go after this answer. We're gonna go, your name is, sir?
Conrad.
Conrad. Hey, Conrad. Counselor Conrad.
No,
We're gonna go with Counselor Conrad, and then I'm gonna get one more question if there is one. I haven't seen any nods in the, no, okay. Is there any other questions after Conrad?
May I answer
Okay,
this
go
question?
ahead.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so this land slopes this way. You see the mouse there? It slopes towards the south, right, to this ditch,
Yeah.
right? So the culvert is proposed to be buried here. See this here? From here to here. This is ditch regrading. This is ditch regrading. So any water that hits here is either gonna go this way and then go back and flow through here, or this way and continue on to flow at the surface. The intent is not to inundate the field,
Thanks, Bill.
and we wouldn't.
Conrad?
So I got two easy questions. One, have you guys done a class C or D cost estimate for these proposed options?
I would say D.
That's something you're prepared to share later on with council?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, whatever council
Yeah.
wants me to do.
I mean, if
we
with
do.
permission of your client.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then the second part is there's a lot of environmental and water rights licensing and compliance issues here that I'm concerned about. Has there been a regulating compliance overview? So we know what we're dealing with. I mean, I know highways is gonna have more than a few things to say about changing drainage patterns and sending more water across the highway. It can be
Conrad,
overcome. but-
Sure, they're fair question.
Yeah.
I'm not terribly concerned. I deal with that all the time, deal with highways, deal with the provincial government on water rights and permitting, that kind of thing. We do that all the time. So for me, it's not a big concern. If something like this needs to happen, it needs to happen. The other thing about it, Conrad, this is a natural problem. This is not somebody draining something, right?
No argument.
And yeah,
No, I
so.
mean, you say it's
so,
not
but
drainage, but.
You're very right that that is a matter of the table. Yeah.
But you are regulating the lake. So I mean, whether you're not draining it or whatever, but you're still regulating it. So that is a change to the drainage pattern.
Yes, you're
Yeah.
very right. I don't dispute
Thanks,
that.
Conrad. Good question. Okay. That, one more question in the back. Yeah.
I have a question.
Is that Donna?
Yes, Dawn,
Yeah,
sorry.
Donna.
There's been a lot, talk about different things, but I haven't heard anything about environmental impact or what. Environmental impact, is there anybody here that is knowledgeable on that? There'd be a huge environmental impact, in my opinion. I don't know. I think somebody needs to know a little something about that.
Okay, thank you.
So what I heard you say, Donna, is you're concerned about the environmental impact of a drought.
I'm concerned about the environment around of the lake and wildlife. Yes.
I think everybody is. Okay, I think that's shared all the way around. Okay, so that lake naturally fluctuates.
Yes.
Okay, so it's going to do that. With respect to the impact on the environment, but setting a high water level, you know, I don't know, maybe a study would be in order. I don't know if a study is necessary. Right, because that lake naturally fluctuates. So to stop it at a particular height, is there a significant justifiable impact on that? At this point, I don't think so, but you know, I could be wrong. But you know, the lake fluctuates. That's a part of the environment, and it's going to do that. It's going to continue to do that.
I do yes, and I do understand that, but it's a significant amount of water that would be lowered from it. Are there any endangered species? I have no idea.
Donna, that's a question that you could follow up with me and we can look into that from a conservation perspective.
Okay.
Can we do that?
Yes, I'm just trying to, they are two separate, environment, wildlife, but they are connected, I guess.
Both environmental and wildlife. If you have my email, if you can follow up with me, I can you know, send that to with Phil's guidance through the proper channels and try to get you an answer on that. Yeah.
I think everybody is concerned about the environment, the health of the lake, the comfort of the people around the lake because they bought for a particular reason there, and the endeavor that the municipality wants to do is reconcile those competing needs. That's the issue on the table. And, yeah, that's one of them. Yeah.
Okay, so last question is going to go to Joni, CAO of Oakland-Wawanesa.
Thank you, and I might be jumping in because maybe this was going to be part of the summary discussion. But the Council of Oakland-Wawanesa has had no discussions on this topic at all. The reason being is that there has been no ask of the municipality. So my first question is there going to be a formal ask of some sort that the council is going to need to consider? And the second question is, what is the consequence if the Council of Oakland-Wawanesa says, thanks, but no thanks, we're not interested in this?
Yeah, good question. Good segue into you know, the final summary on the agenda, which is possible next steps. Thank you. We didn't plan this. We didn't even talk. So it's just a really good question to lead us into the ending here. That'll be up to council. I will request if council wants to request of your council to have these discussions, and that's kind of what I was going to leave it at unless Phil has anything to suggest for next steps.
I do. What I would recommend for next step is that there maybe be some discussion between, you know, the councils as the impacts, because both jurisdictions are going to be impacted like that. We canvass the stakeholders, get more feedback. But then what needs to happen, there needs to be some instructions from council or councils about what the path forward is. You know, there's a possibility if the councils want to pursue funding for this because they think they want to do this or this, there needs to be some discussions with, you know, maybe the people that are impacted, maybe council wants to go another way. And so I would wait for instructions as to how to proceed further.
Great. So that's kind of where I was headed with that after Joni's question was, I think a good idea is in the new year to get these two councils together, get to know each other, you know, and, you know, just chat about possible solutions and where we want to go from here. Is that acceptable?
I do have one quick question.
Go ahead.
Has the option of lifting a house, has that not even been?
Okay, so that was brought up in one of the questions, and that would be a request that would have to be made as an option to the RM of Cornwallis Council to get Phil to look at the estimates.
No, I'm just asking, like, did that cross no one's mind?
Well, it was one of the questions today. So
I know, but
today,
I'm just asking, like, all of this work went into the surveying and getting all this data, and I'm just curious, was
Yeah.
listing a house even an option?
Right.
Well, yes, it did cost our money. Okay, but the idea was that if infrastructure needed to put it in, we need to exhaust whether this makes sense or not. If this was really easy, right? You know, we kind of now come up with class D costs on it, then why would we look at the house, right? Now, you know, unless, you know, so now that we know these costs, maybe we should look at this if council wants to, right? And that could be explored, but the thought crossed our minds, but it was not explored.
Okay, so the next step is going to be if RM of Cornwallis Council would like Phil to explore that option. That's definitely something that is up to RM of Cornwallis Council. And then the new year, there can be discussions between the two councils. I'm going to adjourn the meeting because everybody has lives and families and things to do. And I thank you all for coming. And just Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Thank you so much. I think we had a great meeting here today, and I want just to thank everyone. Thank Phil, thank our council, thank Oakland-Wawanesa, thank everyone for coming, everyone for watching online. And Barb, thank you for your help in setting everything up today. And just enjoy your evening, folks, and take care.
Thank you for the invite.
Thank you for coming.
Okay.